what does it take for you to get something kicked out? And maybe we look at something like you mentioned in the pre-show, Eli Lilly.
Yes.
I mean, it definitely has that look up and to the right, really strong move. But on this monthly chart that we're looking at, it's faltered a little bit more recently.
Absolutely. And so again, obviously great example. So this is the stock that actually, a few years ago when I ran all this data, I said, wow, this Eli Lilly stock has been such a mammoth stock. How come I've never managed to own this? How come that's what happened. And then I plotted a 50-day moving average on top of Lilly, and I said, oh, well, now I can see why. Because if you plot a 50-day moving average on Lilly, what you'll see is you'll never own this thing. You will constantly sell this thing, and you will never own it. And yet here it is, a decade plus later, and it's a very, very strong stock. So again, what happened is that, in 2022, the bear market comes to an end. This is one of the many stocks that bottomed before the market, I'm pretty sure. So what you'll see is that's, from my perspective, that's a good sign. I'm always watching the markets, right? So if you've got stocks and industry groups and sectors that are going to bottom ahead of the market, top ahead of the market, I certainly want to be aware of those kinds of things. But the bottom line is that this is a massive leading stock. And so if we're coming out of, let's say, an equity market condition that says, hey, we got to start taking some risk, this is an early leader because it did not have the wear and tear at the final end of even October. And now it's going up. And now what do you do about it? So the thing with trend following, that where I'm at right now, remember, I came from a 50-day world, which is useless in Lilly. But when I'm looking at a stock like this, I've got a couple of fail-safes, and I certainly have ways of gauging whether there's something wrong. But a 34-week moving average is one example of something that, to me, causes me trouble. And I don't generally hold through a 34-week moving average break, right? Mm-hmm. So I think what you've got on the screen right now is a monthly, just to be clear. So we've got an uptrend. I absolutely agree. It's still in an uptrend, although you're right, it's been deteriorating for a little while. But if you look on that weekly, what's happened now is we've lost that 34-week line, and that's really the first time we've lost it in a while. And so every time a stock has gone through what I'll call an unusual period of gains, because I'm pretty sure this stock was up 160% plus off the 2022, for example. Yeah, actually from the beginning of 23. That's a pretty decent gain, certainly stronger than the market. And so from that perspective, as the stock starts to show wear and tear, what's happening is we're zoomed in, let's say. So, daily action comes at you. And we've got a date. I think it's July, what did I say it was? July the 18th.
I want to say July 18th, something like that.
July 18th on the daily chart. Let's just zoom right in and look at what happens. So on July 18th, what you've got is there's a 50-day moving average break. But I want to tell you that the volume, and I use a force index, which is an Alexander Elder force index. It's not going to be able to be shown on Market Surge. But I can tell you that the 50-day break that we're looking at right there in July is not at all the same as the 50-day break in April. Nick, not at all the same. So yes, it broke the 50-day moving average, but remember what I already said. I certainly don't want to go, sell a position after a couple years in a monster gainer just because it broke a 50-day moving average. But July of 2024, that was different. And that's because suddenly volume was ganging up on this. And so what's happening is you're seeing deterioration, and the deterioration comes in the form of massive volume against. And I don't like that. And then if you look at that just to the right of there, that stock tried to rally back, really didn't make any new high ground. I mean, sure, it made marginal highs, but it basically faded again. So if we now were to zoom out and look at the weekly, what you're going to see is you've got a stock that's essentially stalling, and that's the RS dying away. Right? So the stock is dying away, and who knows? Maybe fundamentally someone's going to say it's a rich stock, right? It's too expensive. I don't know. Not really my problem as an investor. My problem is, of course, to identify when there's character change. And so that's what happens, is that you get daily price moves that seem to be unusual. They start to cause weekly deterioration, and then you can start to see a slowing monthly. And, again, if the 34-week average is still in place, that's kind of a fail-safe that I'm going to exit on if we get there.
Yeah, and I want to bring it back to the fundamentals, because it's worth noting that, here we are, accelerating growth on the earnings side with triple digit, it went from 10 cents to over $1 on the last earnings per share, but the technical action just painting a very different story. So especially with something like, Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, you had kind of this trend, this news, this, speculation of the total addressable market, the TAM, on weight loss, and that was really kind of driving these stocks. How do you know when it's over? Because you certainly don't see it in the earnings right away.
Yeah, so great question. So let me first disclose. When I bought this thing in, let's say, 2022, I didn't like weight loss. I'm not cluing into that. I'm just looking at a stock that's a large cap stock that's incredible. To me, the story tends to sort of hit my attention after, right? And that's the way strong stocks work. Like, we sit there and see the headlines long after this thing's moved. And so then it's like, oh, I see. The weight loss thing. I've heard about these weight loss stuff. Obviously, they're involved. And so you start to clue in. But, you brought up a point already that I want to address as well. So let's pretend we know that Lilly does that and has a product. And let's pretend Novo also does. The very first thing I'm also going to do, let's say there's two strong stocks. I'm also going to plot one divided by the other. And I'll tell you that if you do plot, and I don't know if you can do it market surge, but if you plot Lilly divided by NVO, what you'll see is that clearly Lilly's the leader. So if we were to ever have a conversation, you said, hey, I really like the Novo pullback. I'm going to say, well, Lilly's stronger, and we're talking about the same group and whatnot. So the bottom line is that the story to me doesn't honestly mean much. It's fun, right? It's entertainment almost. But when you're dealing with companies that already have a business, right? They have some type of sales, they have some type of earnings. Obviously, they've got attention on a stock, because there's no stock, I don't believe, that can outperform the S&P 500 for that long over that kind of time frame without having some kind of fundamentals driving all these institutions there, right?
Right.
Which maybe I could just touch on the institutional sponsorship number in Market Surge, which I absolutely love. When I see sponsorship that also is rising, I love that, right? So I have another basket of stocks that I call 4-quarter rising. And so if I go and look, I want to see those numbers rising, because obviously more institutions continuing to report ownership is a good sign. And often what happens is that by the time that starts to deteriorate, or by the time those earnings that we're talking about are deteriorating, the stock already long peaked. And last thing I want to do is hang around because the story was still intact, right? It means nothing.
And I opened up a screen here on our market search chart that we've got up here. Again, we're looking at the weekly chart with, in this case, a 13 and 34 week is our green line and our pink line that David was talking about. We have our default 10 week and 40 week moving average line. That's the red and the black respectively. But the number of funds, is this what you're looking at? Because the number of funds went from 4,375 in March 2023 to 5,669 in September 2024. So quite the increase.
Anytime I'm going to be faced with an A versus B decision and I'm going to see a rising sponsorship number like that, I like it. It's just that, to me, that's a fundamental, because that to me is there's a bunch of fundamental people, like with the fundamental hats on only, that are included in that number, right? And so that to me speaks very well, because from my experience, in the same way that stocks tend to come under massive distribution and change tune before there's a story to explain why, the truth is somebody's doing that selling, right? And that's where we get into some of these stocks. They do peak. And when you've got institutions that have to unload this stuff, they take a long time to deal with their positions. Thankfully, you and I, and certainly me on behalf of clients, it's not a problem. Liquidity always rules, but I certainly am not going to hang around waiting for a narrative to change before pushing sell.
Yeah.